Welcome to Peers, political economic elemental researchers and strategists. At Peers, we stand as your all-in-one partner, adept at steering you through the intricate realms of politics, economics, and business. Join us at Peers. We're our seasoned team with expertise in politics, economy, business, and law is committed to your success. Together, we will navigate the future, making informed decisions that lead to lasting impacts. Follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn to stay informed about how we can help you achieve your goals.
Previously on Episode 20, the future of the Philippines is Mindanao, mapping progress and avoiding threats.
Just the reports of the growth of the country posting at around 5.9. Mindanao posted at around 5.7%. Over the years, Mindanao had been posting at average at 5.6%, and sometimes it reached 7.2% back in some years back. And more often we hit higher than the national average because of the potential of our growth. But then again, in the recent period, the first quarter report showed that electronics gadgets have taken over the agriculture and as well as the manufacturing contribution. How do you look at the potential of Mindanao and also the development of the international community, the new perspective of the international community given what had happened in the Middle East? And how do we look at yung Mindanao natin, sir, na growth and prosperity?
Okay, that's the growth of Mindanao itself, of course, is still tied down to your agricultural development here. It reflects the state of your present agricultural situation here. One of the things that I have noticed was the recurring gaps that we see in the agricultural value chains that have really eluded us in becoming much more competitive than we are. So the numbers you're looking at could have been more.
Framework of the disaster resilience in the country. No, we are bounded by the law, yung Public Act 10121, and that provides us the mandate, the vision, the policies, the structures, the funds, and operating procedures on managing disaster resilience or promoting and even trying to reach out to people para maging resilient nga ang buong Pilipinas, no? It has a law called 10121. Now, the law provides us also 4 pillars, yung sinasabi na prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and rehabilitation and recovery. So yung balance ng execution o developing all the 4 pillars determines much ano yung outcomes na in terms of disaster resilience, no? So how much effort is being done in preparedness, prevention, mitigation, response, and rehabilitation, recovery.
Sir Tony, in relation to our competitiveness, our attractiveness, Mindanao becoming a destination of investors.
Okay, in those terms, but I just would like to, before I answer that, I just have a comment.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, sir. Consultant.
Here. From our experience also, and looking back at what happened during Yolanda, I could not forget a very vivid memory of having seen a barangay in Leyte that survived the onslaught of Yolanda. And this barangay invested a lot in the planting of mangroves that in a way mitigated really the flow of seawater, the rising waters that hit our coastal communities. So, it made me really think that it's not really that expensive to be investing in something like that. Now, on the matter of financing, I think with the implementation now of the Mandanos ruling, that gives a lot of financing options to your LGUs. We, on the other hand, in the private sector, are more concerned with how these funds are being used. No, we are aware that a lot of these municipalities belong to the fourth and sixth class municipalities. Therefore, they are in a way limited of their resources, as they are only capable of paying for their upkeep or to keep the municipality running enough to pay your salaries and wages and other limited operations. That itself has impeded a lot of that. But I also look at this as opportunities for us to see and become more innovative in developing perhaps a green bond type of financing where investments can really be made and redirected through the green bond, or the proceeds of which can be put into good use in projects that would also help secure the communities, at the same time provide for their economic well-being.
Standard operating procedures, policies to improve operations, and building networks with stakeholders like private sector, the church, the big companies, even academe, and all the others. Hanggang barangay yan, no? Hanggang barangay yung playbook natin, and that is supported by guidelines, no? Directives, the written guidelines and directives, how to operate an emergency operation center, how to operate an incident management team, how to do a pre-disaster risk assessment, how to do post-disaster. Lahat yan, meron tayong that's what we do every day, no? And it's being improved through regular conferences of regional directors and regular conferences of our mga different sections, yung 4 pillars, and working together with the national agencies, NEDA and the others, no, in the Disaster Council.
Yeah.
Now,
To all our friends, viewers, followers, fellow movers for real democracy and development, Filipinos here and abroad, naimbaga bigat. Maayong buntag, marahay na aga, mayapayabak, maupay nga aga, mapia kapipita, sabal kair, maayong aga, magandang umaga, good morning to everyone. You know, I always do this greeting because I'd like to, peers would like to emphasize that we're doing all this, promoting a more intensive, substantive discussion precisely for the purpose of strengthening our democracy, so that at least viewers and everyone will have was this an alternative source of information and can also engage in a more meaningful and informative discussion. This morning, I'm glad to have with us two experts on elections, and particularly we will be talking about the need to secure our vote, the need to secure the exercise of our right of suffrage, and as much as possible, of course, inform everyone that your decision is sacred, and that it should be influenced by no one other than you yourself who's making the crucial decision. You know, the Philippines is very much young democracy. For obvious reasons, our colonial history can explain our being young as a democracy entirely. But as it is, you can just imagine the vulnerability of all countries, especially even those advanced democracies. Just recently, I've been going through reports. There have been denial of service attacks, to influence apparently the recently concluded European Parliament elections. In 2016, both the elections of that elected the former US President Trump to office and Britain's decision to leave the European Union have been reported to be influenced by outside interests. So you can just imagine how critical today's day and age, in that by click of a button you can influence, even organize street protests and influence people entirely. What we are interested at this morning is to understand the vulnerability of our very own elections, not to mention, of course, the possibility that we will be influenced by other interests in making our decisions. Ultimately, we'd like to have the authorities on notice that we really have to prepare ourselves and, as much as possible, do everything to secure the vote. This morning, let me introduce to you our resource person, no less than Dr. Sven Herpig, who's based in Berlin. We've had him as our guest. In fact, he's not a guest, he's a member of Peers himself, one of the founding members. And he's no less the consultant in cybersecurity in the Federal Ministry of Defense in Germany, and even in the United States Congress. So you can just imagine how much authority we can hear from him, sharing his views on this matter. Good morning, Dr. Sven.
Morning.
Good to have you back. And also, we have no less than the architect of automated elections in the Philippines. I always say that because, again, as I've explained in the previous episode that we had him, it was really, a fresh start, so to speak, when finally we had automated elections introduced during his time. At that time, we were waiting for days before the result of elections come out. But during his watch, we waited for hours only and the results already came in. Ladies and gentlemen, let's greet former COMELEC Commissioner Attorney Goy Larrazabal, who is also an advocate for sustainable development. Attorney Goy.
Prof, magbuntag, thank you very much for inviting me. Salamat na appeal ko aning conversation.
Thank you, Konggoy. Let me get right into it, no? And I fear, of course, that we really have to try our best to explain it in plainer language, in the vernacular, so to speak. Pardon that as much as possible we have to speak in English here because most of the terms are in English, but nonetheless, I'm confident that our viewers will understand it pretty well. So let me ask Dr. Sven first. What are we expecting? In terms when we talk about disrupting elections, especially by and through the use of cyberspace, by use of the internet, by use of the technology, what is it exactly that we're expecting? At least from how you've seen it in the past few years, in the past elections that you've seen and observed.
Thank you, Professor. I think when we talk about election security, one thing we should consider is securing our election starts way before we actually go and cast our vote. It starts when we start campaigning, and it ends when everyone, or at least the vast majority, has accepted the result of the elections. This is the time frame we're looking at when we talk about securing our elections. And I just want to start with two more framing ideas, which I think are very helpful for understanding election security. One is you, as a country, have always to decide where the red line goes between legitimate campaigning and disinformation, manipulation, so on, so far. And it differs from country to country. It might differ from election to election, but you have to make up some sort of ground rules of what is legitimate, what can candidates and parties do, and what can they not do. Some of that is enshrined in the legal framework. For example, you cannot assassinate someone. That's illegal, of course. But then there's more intricate details about, can you lie about someone's marriage status or other things? Okay. And then to go one step further, you have to look at it from two perspectives. From the national perspective, domestically, what do you want to allow your parties, your candidates, your politicians to do and what not? And what will you allow foreign actors to do? Like, is a foreign company allowed to donate funding to your candidate? Are they supposed to advertise on television for a certain candidate or against a certain candidate? That differs from domestic groups, what you allow them to do, to foreign groups. What do you want, for example, Chinese groups should be able to do during your elections and what not? It will differ. And the second point of framing I want to offer is, and I know I'm looking at you, Professor, that might not sit well with a lot of political scientists. There are two things that matters a lot. One is, of course, that in the end of the day, the votes will be allocated to those the people voted for. Like if I get 10 votes, I should in the end have 10 votes, right? The second is the integrity. But the second thing, which I think may be more important, and bear with me here, is if the result is perceived as legitimate and uninterfered. For example, two extremes. Would you rather have an election which is completely integer, but no one believes the outcome, or the majority doesn't believe the outcome? Or do you want to have an election where everyone believes the outcome, or the majority believes the outcome, but it's actually interfered with and the results are not the results, the ballots that you cast? And that's very tricky because that means, in the end of the day, the majority in a democracy must believe the outcomes are to be right. So perception is really important. And let me just finish on that last note. It is not clear how much disinformation and such kind of interference can actually sway people. Like few people will go, yeah, actually, I thought I was going to vote for that person, but then I read this media piece, which is disinformation, and then I decided for the other person. It's really difficult to grasp how much you can sway the public opinion with disinformation. However, and circling back to your first comment, if we look at the 2016 American presidential elections, and if we look at the vote that made the United Kingdom leave the European Union, these were super close. And you can imagine that disinformation campaigns have the power to at least push these couple of numbers across the aisle to vote for the other person. Then you will have a completely different outcome.
So before I go to Comgoy here,
recording in progress.
I'd like to emphasize that we're talking of influencing the vote just yet. No, we're not yet talking of the vote itself yet. No, so let me ask Comgoy now. Last episode, Com, we were talking about the limitations of the commission. Not only in terms of operations, but even its mandate. No. Can you educate us, educate the public in this regard? I mean, is the mandate of the commission including, making sure that at least during the election period, that means including the campaign at the very least, COMELEC can prevent, or should we say at the very least police, was this activities that one way or the other could influence the vote significantly, particularly from foreign attacks or foreign attempts to influence the result of the vote. Is that covered by COMELEC's mandate, and are we doing something about it?
Well, unfortunately, the election code is quite old already, and there's been a lot of advancement in technology and election management that the code is not up where it should be. The problem here is that there were some special laws passed before that were just band-aid solutions. There was no general overhaul of the election code. And as a consequence of that, there are many loopholes that have yet to be plugged. Now, when you talk about safeguarding the electoral process, including perception, technology, etc., uh, the concern is that when some people talk about addressing these issues, they think it's going to be a one-step thing, wherein which I'm going to implement this now, and it's going to solve the problems. Uh, when you address or when you try to plug the loopholes, especially in technology, it's not a one election program. It has to be there has to be a a long-term plan, um, and you implement portions of it during each and every election cycle. So for example, if you have 10 goals, you don't intend to solve those 10 goals in one elections. You go to the first two elections, you test your first two goals pagkatapos. That's a precursor for additional steps that can be taken. You don't get from A to Z at one time. That's the problem some people have because they think it's solvable in one election. It's not. It's step by step. You don't talk about just one election, but multiple election cycles to address the concerns. So that should be the focus of them. Now, it might not be, it might not be earth-shaking, but it lays the basis for additional implementation of programs in the next elections.
Now, I mean, let me follow through on that. Since I mean, I suppose it's not only we in the Philippines who are now aware of what happened in 2016 U.S. presidential election and UK election to exit from EU. No? So, and from 2016, we've had the 2019 and 2022 elections.
Yes.
Are our officials in COMELEC taking note of all these incidents, and that we've at the very least started taking steps towards securing our election?
There are steps naman, and taking off from what Dr. Sven said, in elections, perception is very important, and in many cases, perception is reality, di ba?
Exactly.
So they have to address those concerns. But my take on it is, the term of election commissioners in COMELEC is usually maximum 7 years. Some, like myself, less than 2 years. Some are 3 years, 4 years. But I think the focus should be not on personalizing programs, but you institutionalize programs, and you bring in the senior staff and people who will be in the commission. Whether you change commissioners, whether you change the chairman, they will be the ones to ensure that the programs will be implemented continuously and efficiently.
Okay, so medyo mahabang usapan pa pala to, no? Precisely because when
Yes.
when the reforms that we've been talking about in the previous episode, I suppose, also include organizational reforms. So we'll get back. We'll get back to that. Let me ask Dr. Sven again. Can you cite us particular examples, Sven? What are the countries that have actually experienced attacks that one way or the other? I mean, at the very least, there's an indication of influence or indication of disruption of elections. I suppose there are particular cases other than what we've mentioned earlier, no? The U.S. presidential election in 2016 and UK's decision to exit the European Union.
I think the list is very long. Especially if you go back and bear with me for a second, if we look at election interference before we were using all this computer stuff a lot, and then you look at the list of election interferences, and then you might come up with a list where a lot of times the United States is very much on that list if you look at South America. So election interference is actually internationally prohibited, but it has been done a lot in the past. And not only by the, as we expect, like the evil countries like North Korea or so. It's also our friends and allies who do that occasionally. But if we look at, and we want to focus on the current times, we have seen what you just mentioned. We have seen ways to influence the French election. I believe it was 2017, for example. We have seen election interferences with Ukrainian elections. There we have seen the French and the Ukrainian election. I think it was the 2015, but I'm not quite sure the year, or 2018 in Ukraine. When you look at these two elections and the interferences, what you can see is that these were heavily cyber-enabled. What do I mean when I say cyber-enabled? I basically mean hacking was going on. Computer systems were compromised. In the Ukrainian election, actually, it's an interesting case because you can see that the attackers, let's call them attackers, they wanted to change the voting results. They already wanted to make sure that on national TV in the evening of the election, that the wrong numbers are shown on television, for example. And the numbers were very far off from the actual election results. So there was a lot of, it was Ukraine. It was in the Ukraine. And so there was a lot of heavy lifting was done in those elections. In the French elections, hacking was going on. And then referring back to the 2016 presidential elections in the US, it's also interesting because what we've learned is that actually two different kind of Russian threat actors, hacking groups, were compromising the Democratic National Committee, so Hillary Clinton's party at the time. And one group actually wanted to stay silent and just read emails and everything, whereas the other group actually copied whatever they can copy and then published it in what we call hack and leak operation. Hack and leak operation binds together hacking and then through that spinning misinformation around with some true core. Well, if you find really bad things, then of course you have a very good true core to actually influence the perception. So long story short, interfering elections has a long history, and it just got more interesting when using computer systems, one, of course, for campaigning, but also for party communications, for all the internal stuff that we do with our phones and everything. And then going to, I'm looking at the commissioner, of course, the area of actually using computers for the actual election process.
So what I gathered from what you said is that it's Ukraine that experienced the direct attack as far as the conduct of the elections itself, not only campaign. So that's also possible. So in our case, Congoy, I suppose that's one of the things that you look for, no? As far as the service provider is concerned. Considering we've had was this automated elections for so many elections now, are we somehow getting good at it, or at least securing it better?
Well, you know what, the difference is that at least in the Philippines, it's for an OMR-based election system. So it's paper-based system. So, and we're offline until each counting machine is offline until until after you print out 8 copies of ERs, election returns. That's when you transmit. The concern here is that we're going to be using a new election system for 2025, and with the new election system, not many are familiar with it. That's where a lot of misinformation can come in. Bad actors can exploit this and share fake information or misinformation that will cast doubt as to the integrity, not only integrity of the system, but also in the actual results. And even if it's accurate, but going back to what I mentioned, the perception is that it's inaccurate or unreliable. That will affect the confidence of the voters in the results of that election. That's going to, for me, that's very important.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in for a second, if you allow me.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. So we Germans pride ourselves with we're still voting on paper, you know, and the current reading of our constitution is that elections in Germany for the parliament and so on can only be fair, and everything that you need to do comply with the constitution if it's done by paper. That can change, but currently it's not. And then you have a very German view of it, and everything which is like has computers can't work or can be hacked. It's of course utter craziness. You have to look at the context. We had elections in Germany, also state elections, where they weren't be able to deliver enough ballots on time. So voters were there, but they
Yes.
couldn't vote because there's no ballots. There's miscounting. Every election, they don't tell you that, but there's a lot of miscounting. They count twice, thrice, they miscount a lot of times. Like all of that happens. That's without any foreign influence, with any adversary trying to influence elections. So you actually have to look what in your country or your locality works best and produces the fewest frictions, the fewest accidents, and the fewest attack surface. This is super important. That's why it's always interesting to me when I see experts coming on saying like, "Oh yeah, the Philippines, they are voting with machines. Of course, that can be hacked." I'm sure if done right, and I think the commissioner made sure that it's done right, it will have a higher percentage of accuracy, or it can have a higher percentage of accuracy
Yes.
than paper ballots, because you all know what happened in the last 20, 30, 40 years of elections in the Philippines with holdups, with everything, with
Yes.
ballot stuffing, and you know that. And you can negate that if you do the computerization of that well. But I think one thing I will end on, which includes paper ballots, is of course, and Commissioner, you mentioned it, the voters have to make sure that there's a paper ballot, it can be scanned and transmitted and concluded, and then people can recount it later on as fallback
Yes.
mechanism. You can recount, you can see, okay, our district says there's 100 votes for that candidate, I only have 50 paper ballots. That doesn't work. You have to make sure that you
Yes.
can explain that you have a fallback, which is paper, and then you can recount. Then it takes 1 or 2 days longer to get the final result, but you
That's
have the
correct.
result, you can prove it with a paper trail. This is ultimately important.
I think that
Yes,
was the
I agree.
logic entirely. That's why Kumgoy precisely, when he was building this setup, that was the intent, to have a paper, And I
Yeah.
suppose there were instances that results had to go back to the paper counting of the votes on paper, right?
Yes. There's a system, fail-safe system here, where in which not fail-safe, but there's a backup system here, where in which there's a random manual audit that will be conducted after every elections. Interestingly enough, the most number of cluster precincts that was audited randomly was the 2010 elections. Ideally, should increase. Um, Dr. Sven mentioned something very, very important. As in, not many people understand the importance of this, but um, when you conduct elections, it's not just about the system, the software, the hardware. It's the how it's conducted. The people who run the elections in the polling precincts, how ballots are distributed, the accountable forms are in the ballot. It's untampered. The right number of ballots is delivered. You follow everything. So the human participation has to be monitored. Not just people look at software, they look at hardware, but the way the elections is run, not only from the central office but down to the voting centers, that is very, very important. That's, for me, that's equally or even more important than the software hardware.
But all of these, or at least so much of it, will change now, given the new system, and the way you've been
Um,
it to me, kind of make me nervous.
no, no, but but the what happens now is, even if we have the same OMR, optical mark reader election system, it's a different vendor. It's a different basically system
Uh-huh,
that
uh-huh.
that people have to be educated about. For example, when you feed the ballot into the machine, my understanding is that you have to confirm that the votes cast in the ballot are read accurately. Then you confirm, then it's fed into the ballot box. That's not the procedure before, and that's a very small thing, but that will, for me, that might and could and probably will affect the way elections will be run in the precinct. Because if people are not aware that these are additional steps in the voting process, it might cause confusion, but more importantly, it might be used by others to create doubt as to results of the elections. And there are people like that.
So in other words, it's a matter of informing the public, so to speak, no? And the COMELEC has really get into it as soon as possible, so that every voter is told that there is this additional step to be taken.
Yeah, and that's one of them. That's an important thing. No, there's a lot of things that have to be done, steps that have to be done. But what we did in 2010, that was the first time it was done. We did brand intrusion. We did brand intrusion, where in which we work with the networks in the Philippines, and we did voter education programs in a telenovela, in a noontime show, and we worked with some networks where in which they did both education videos, because not everybody reads the news. Especially now, a lot of people just they go on social media, just get their news there. They don't read newspapers.
Exactly.
Yes, and so now, how do you tap into that? How do you create more information using those tools? It's tricky. It's not easy. It's not as easy as some people think. There's a technique to it, and I hope they'll be able to do it correctly and efficiently.
I will volunteer peers. I suppose my fellow peers will not mind me volunteering our platform. No, if there's a video that COMELEC would like to share, or if we can have them in an episode or two, so that it can be properly explained. Perhaps you can help us get to them, Com, in this regard.
I will. I'll reach out to them, and I'll tell them, Prof. And I'll get back to you.
Anyway, let me go back to elections again, because I was quite alarmed. No? I mean, that's Ukraine, and I suppose Russia has every interest to was this influence, no, even change the results of elections in Ukraine, Dr. Sven, no, but. I'm wondering, have you encountered any story that happened nearer our shores, or at least in Asia, perhaps? And you can share us some indications of activities that we should be prepared or worry about?
No, actually not, but I think it also. I mean, we're conflating two things right now, which we might want to call out again, and that will show you why we don't see it every time. So there's two ways, right? If one way is I want to get a certain party or candidate elected, right?
Exactly.
So I will have this misinformation or also legitimate campaigning running. I will try. You know what? I will not hack the election machines or try to. I will just go to people and offer them money and say, please vote for me. You know, like that's easier, that's faster, and because getting a certain person or a certain party elected is much more difficult than the other thing. And the other thing is interrupting or reducing the trust in the integrity of the elections, because there you don't have to make any candidate win or party. What you just have to make sure, you have to just sow distrust in the system, that the government cannot handle it. So what you will do is misinformation about what the commissioner just said, like, oh, they have new machines, maybe they are not working anymore, maybe their old ones didn't get them the results they wanted, or they're too good, now they're introducing new ones, we don't understand them. Then you will, if you can do, I mean, they are computers, you can, of course, hack computers. It doesn't get you very far if you want to have a certain candidate elected, because then you would just pay people to vote for it. It's easier. But you will make sure that these machines don't work. Maybe the network fails and the satellite uplink is also disrupted. People will feel that the machines are not working properly. This is what you will do to wreak havoc and to destroy the trust in the government conducting elections, and then you will have a problem. And I guess for a lot of threat actors, when we talk about international interference, when we look at Russia interfering in Europe, when we look at China interfering in the ASEAN region, maybe in elections, they will go rather for that, because for them it's easier to do that, to basically sow distrust in the elections, than to get certain candidates to win. I mean, it's really difficult, and if you want to do it at scale, there's easier ways to do that.
So, at least that gives us more thought as to where to begin, no? Or at least where to concentrate our efforts to secure the vote. Now, so going back to the new system, Comgoy, are there new security features that supposedly are introduced? Precisely, I suppose the reason why we had to change, as you've mentioned in the previous episode, just to refresh the memory of our viewers, what Comgoy has recommended from the very start is that every election, as much as possible, there's a new provider. I don't know if I got that right, Comgoy, so that at least there's no familiarity or there's no was this redundancy as far as the procedures are concerned, and that everyone will again have to be on their toes, not only learning the system but adapting to the system, and therefore more difficult for interested parties to get into and influence and so on and so forth. So I suppose, I don't know, am I right to assume that the new system somehow introduces what more security measures in this regard that at least addresses some of the concerns that were raised in previous elections?
Well, there are additional features now, no, additional security features, but one of the things that has to be done is there has to be a code review of the software that will be used. I'm not so sure if they started that already with the code review, but if they have that, that has to be certified by international certification company entity, then there has to be a local source code review. Now, my suggestion before was that every few elections you have a new provider, at least, or some updates to at least to you have to be ahead of the actors, the bad actors who will try to sow misinformation and cast doubt. The problem here is that there's it's easy for in the Philippines, it's easy for people to say that they did not lose, they were just cheated. But if the best way to counter that is to create more and more and more information so the people will be aware. The challenge there is you have to be at it 24/7. There's no Sundays. Before, when I started promoting the elections, the only time I was able to rest was the wake of my brother in February and after the elections na. Throughout the whole time, even Sundays we were working, even Sundays we were talking to people, educating people, telling them what's the system, what's the features. If we had to tell them 10 times in one day, we would do that. We would not just tell them, oh, we already discussed that. We already informed you about that. No, we had to tell them again, because my sentiment is that if I'm talking to 100 people and 95 people of those already know, but 5 don't, my goal is not to reach out to the 95. My goal is to reach out to the 5 who might not be aware. And if I talk to them and inform them, at least they will be confident in the election results. If I don't and bad actors talk to them, that 5 can spread misinformation to others, so that 5 can probably be 50 or even 100 after a short period of time. So you have to be on the offensive 24/7.
I was just wondering. I don't know if this will not sound unusual, Dr. Sven, no? But was there any instance in Germany or probably any part in Europe where a candidate or a political party cried, that they were cheated? And so, is that even possible in your version of elections?
I can't remember. I can't remember an instance in Germany, but I wouldn't discount it, especially now that we moved in the last years to a very polarized world. I think we've definitely seen that in Europe, but I think if we just mentioned, like, what do we do about it, right? And I can give you 2 examples which illustrate, I think, what direction you can take, also to mitigate that, as the Commissioner just said. The US, for example, introduced a couple of years back something like debunking. So their office in charge of securing the elections will respond to rumors about certain machines not working, certain machines being, hacked or something. They will have a website running for the couple of weeks run up to the elections, until the elections, which will debunk all these things that are not true about the integrity of the election process. So people can just go there, voters can go there and can see, oh, what my neighbor just told me, is that true? And then you have it debunked. Of course, you need a certain base trust into the government to go to the website and believe what they are telling you. But if you don't believe in the government in the first place, then I don't know, it's really difficult to recreate the trust. And that can be coupled with something that the French have been doing already for some time. They have a media blackout. So I think 2 days or so before the actual election day, there's a media blackout where media is not allowed to report on candidates, on the elections and campaigning and everything. So what it does is it buys you 2 days buffer. So if something comes out that is not correct, you have these 2 days where you can reply as the government to say like, oh, this is not true. Here is a list of sources, if you want to do that. Otherwise, you might have a Streisand effect, but that's a different discussion, where everyone just jumps on the issue because now you're reporting that it's wrong. But actually, it buys you also some time, these 2 days. And that's also one thing that in the 2017 elections helped the French when threat actors allegedly, or they hacked certain systems and published information about Macron and so on. They did it, I think, 3 or 4 hours before the media blackout kicked in. So they didn't get traction with all the misinformation and their leakage, because then there was a media blackout on the election process, and then there was election day. So there is things that you can do, but it's not easy to do, and it requires, of course, a base trust in the government. Because then if we want to go further, we go into platform regulation. How do you deal with Facebook? How do you deal with the messengers like Viber? That's going to be then very complicated and difficult. But these are 2 things that we have seen proven as a response to election interference.
With the kind of democracy that we have here in the Philippines, which my friend Dr. Sven, you're very familiar. No, I don't think we can consider the last 2 options. But am I right in assuming, Comgoy, that at least the first option that he mentioned is something that's already there, or is I suppose in the radar of Comelec, that there's a checker, so to speak, that if there's this information. Kasi I think I encountered that somehow before.
Yeah, but and the problem with it is I think there was a proposal for the commission to regulate AI. I would say, where do you start? How do you even start defining what's AI and how it will be used? They tried to regulate social media, but it's so complex that it's not like, okay, we're going to regulate and that's it. There are so many ways around it. And like, for example, the private messaging system, like Telegram or Signal or WhatsApp or Viber. You say, how do you regulate those message platforms? Well, it's like, it's difficult. And you don't expect to solve everything at one go. You chip off a bit, the results might not be, like dramatic. I said, dramatic, but it makes a dent, and that's what you had to look at, not for purposes of making people think you're doing a great thing, but you're doing something that will benefit democracy.
Well, anyway, that's the cue that I will take. No, is there anything that we can do as private citizens, to contribute and ensure that elections are credible? Because as you both already pointed out, it's kind of it's this out of this world to even consider regulating platforms. Was this even doing a media blackout is something that I cannot imagine happening in the Philippines. So what do we do? I mean, PPCRV, NAMFEL are there to quote unquote supposedly secure, but are they actually doing enough? Can individuals do their bit, so to speak, and perhaps kind of information campaign can be done so that we make every citizen a security soldier, so to speak. Can we do something like that?
Um, it's hard
Mhm.
because it requires you to do a lot of stuff, and it, like, for example, somebody sends me a message on Facebook Messenger. If somebody does that, nor especially with some uh voters in a specific age group, the chances are, uy, it was sent to me by some friend. They don't even verify it. They click forward right away. They don't, oh, is this true? They immediately forward, send it through the different private messaging platforms. And if you call them out, if, like, for example, that happened to me before and I got a message, I said, hey, you know what you're sending is fake. There wasn't even a sorry. It's just, okay. It's like, you're not so sure if that person, if he told others that what he sent was actually fake news. Because it takes time, it takes effort, and some people are sorry, but they're just lazy.
Yeah.
But you need to be proactive. You need to say if you sent misinformation or fake news, you have to correct it right away. You don't just assume that since you sent misinformation, um, they don't reply to you. Uh, that's it. No, you have to tell them that what was sent was wrong or what you received was wrong, and they should correct it. If not, it will just spread and spread and spread, and the problem just goes bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, at the end of the day, really, you have to what's this? Go to every person, so to speak, every individual on social media, and inform them. In fact, convince them that they have to double check every information that they encounter before they even send it to another. No, but
Yeah,
that will take so much time and
that's
effort. So,
that's that's difficult to do. I'm telling you, it's so hard.
But
Yeah, I
we
think
have organized groups in the Philippines, Dr. Sven. Is there anything that we can recommend to, let's say, NAMFREL or PPCRV? Because they have an army, so to speak, of, I don't know, volunteers who can help, or at least as an organization, perhaps they can bolster any effort to come to inform everyone. Would that help? And if it is going to help, what can we tell them that they could do as a group?
I think we have a similar challenge in cybersecurity, which is like we always say, like, oh, people have to be more vigilant, they have to pay attention, and I think we're being super unfair to our constituents because we cannot put the integrity of the election on the shoulders of the voter. I mean, of course, you can ask them to
I agree.
report if they see something. They can record when they see someone threatening someone with a weapon to vote for someone else. You know, like you can do all of that, but that should come after all of that. We should start at the top, and the top is always the candidates themselves. I don't know which
Agree.
elections that were, but there's like code of conduct. Like even
Yes.
if there's fake news about which discredits my opponent, I should go to the media and say, well, this is not true. There should be a code of conduct. It doesn't have to be written down ethical behavior by the candidates and the parties to do the right thing. Then you go to the step to the government, like Comelec, but and there you have to discover what their role can actually be, because when we talk about media blackouts or debunking, that might work in one country where we say like, oh, the French are doing it great. If Russia does the same thing, they're like, it's an authoritarian state. They are doing media blackouts. So like you have to be extreme careful what the government can do, how the trust level is, and what they're supposed to do. At the bottom line, they can provide transparent information that can be verified. If you believe it or not, that's a different story. But that's what the government can do at the bottom line. They can do much more, but then it depends on how it's perceived by the populace. If they say like, oh yeah, our government is taking care of us, or if they say like, oh, they're authoritarian, we can't report anymore before the election. So you have to be super careful when it comes to government. And then we go to organized groups. That depends like how independent they are perceived and everything. Where's the funding coming from? Do you really have independent groups that objectively withstand all scrutiny for the majority? Then you can give them certain jobs like informing voters how the vote is going, how you're doing it, why it's important, and what they need to do. You can go there, but you really have to start at the top, and then at the end of the day, of course, you shouldn't share and spread misinformation. But I think honestly, like most of us are like, oh, it's interesting, oh, it's fun. Yeah, I'm just gonna send it to someone else. Then you can. They started with WhatsApp. They said, yeah, WhatsApp you can only forward to like what 100 people now or 50 or whatever. I think they started in India. These are all technical solutions that don't really help. And yes, you are responsible for what you do, of course, but I think the constituents are the last ones that can help with that. And yeah, reporting mechanisms and informing citizens about the process so that they understand and what's going on. I think that's baseline where we could start.
You know, honestly, the reason why I even thought of it, Dr. Sven, as you know, of course, we've been studying political science for God knows how long, and you know, the kind of democracy that we have here in the Philippines is simply, I don't know even if there's any institution that we can speak of. No, I mean, every man to himself, so to speak. That's the kind of politics that we have. It's very personal, and everything that is done politically, there are no real political parties, and so you can barely even consider you know, any entity as quote unquote a steadfast was this institution, so to speak. And so hence the involvement of civil society have been quite significant. In fact, uh, they're not only a given; it's a necessity, so to speak, because otherwise, you know, as you mentioned, the integrity of elections is very much dependent on was this the belief of the people to their government, which unfortunately hardly is there. So anyway, let me ask this one last question to Comboy. I mean, you're no longer in Comelec, but you know, let me tell the public that just the same, even if this guy is no longer in Comelec, he's still the go-to guy. Believe me, no? He's still the go-to guy when it comes to elections. And I haven't. No, I don't. I don't know. I don't know if I'm not just reading enough newspapers or enough news reports, but I'm not sure if there have been was this. Enough information disseminated already on the background of the new service provider. It's I understand it's South Korean, no? Could you at least educate us with what you know, Comgoy, what countries they've provided services to, or at least so that the public will know, no, what to expect, or I mean, how to compare them with the previous service provider.
Well, I don't want to I don't want to say I don't want to speak for the technology provider. I hope you understand.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Comelec has been doing some boat education programs. They've been doing a road show there where they go around the country. But if I were just to, if my humble advice, my humble opinion, is that I think they should take a different approach to it. Don't take the traditional path on voter education, because I think that may work in some instances and in some elections, but this one, I think you need a different a more aggressive approach where you tap on several social media platforms, but do it right in such a way that it's effective, because you want to reach that segment of the voting population, young, new voters who might not be aware of how to cast their vote. But I just realized that you also have to tap into the voting population who've been voting for in the previous elections, but are unaware of the new steps in the procedure for voting. So it's not just telling them that this is a system of voting. You have to tell them that this is a new system of voting, and these are the additional steps. So when they get to the voting center, they won't get confused. They already know what to expect. You manage your expectations, and you make sure that they know what will happen when they cast their ballot. Because if when they cast their ballot, they are unaware of the steps or additional steps, then that may provide an opening for them to be susceptible to misinformation and fake news.
Oh well, as the proverbial saying goes, no, it's a brave new world out there, and
Yeah.
I suppose it's a new world almost every year or every day even. And whether we like it or not, public institutions should be able to adopt. But again, unfortunately, in the case of the Philippines, there's so much more to be had as far as public institutions are concerned. And coming from established or at the very least, a more established democracy, and coming from someone who's been observing the challenges to elections nowadays, uh, what can you say as your concluding remarks and probably recommendation, whether to the government, to the individual, and hopefully at least helps us, the Philippines, in you know securing the midterm election vote. Dr. Sven?
I think talk like this is already a very good way. I think we have to remain positive. I think we have to work towards getting better. And as Commissioner said, it's not a one step; it's a multi-step process. And I think we also have to rethink how we who worked on this issue communicate about it. If we always say like, yeah, it's insecure, yeah, we have to get better, that also, of course, influences the perception. So we have to be very careful when we choose our words, what we say about it, and yeah, it is difficult. It's a very complex challenge, but with the right people in place, you're moving forward. And I think automating it is a first step, and there's more steps to follow that will be gone. And Rome wasn't built in a day, so keep on working towards common goal. Democracy is valuable, so it should be protected. And we ourselves have to be positive and optimistic that that can be done.
Thank you again, Dr. Sven, for having considered our invitation, and for giving us some time with your very, very hectic schedule there in the other side of the world. Komgoy, what else can you say? And as you've always said to me and to the viewers, there's no harm in repeating, no, and repeating, no, what
Yes.
needs to be done as far as elections are concerned. What else can you tell our viewers, the voters, and in fact, perhaps even message to the COMELEC, what needs to be done in securing next year's vote?
Um, Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof, for inviting me to join this discussion. Dr. Sven, great insight. I just want to remind everybody that election improving election system starts with you, me. Uh, we are the change we want to be. Uh, we can rely on others to do things, but if we don't do it ourselves, we don't take the proactive steps of uh, helping the commission and improving things, then we become part of the problem. So if you see that there's something that needs to be done, point it out to people, help them. Uh, if you see that the commission is doing something that can be improved, make suggestions to them. The best that can happen is they'll listen to your suggestion and they'll make things better. The worst is that can happen is nothing happens, but at least you've done your part to try to make things better. So never stop trying. The worst that can happen is nothing will happen, but the best thing that can happen is something good comes out of it.
Taking off from this the views imparted by our guest, no, I hope that by and through this episode and all the previous episodes we've had, no, in this election series, that we at Peers are able to somehow make a dent in preparing for next year's election, not only preparing the country, not only preparing the voter, but also somehow preparing the authorities, COMELEC, in this regard to ensure the success and credibility of next year's elections. Let me just conclude this episode by three takeaways. One, we have to recognize that there were attempts, in fact, not attempts, but consummated activities to disrupt elections in different parts of the world. And when we say disruption, the disruption is usually before elections, during the campaign, misinformation, and as much as possible, in the end, the more feasible and the more accessible option for those interested parties is to disrupt elections and to somehow result to questioning the credibility of the elections, because that's easier, compared to influencing the voters to support and vote for a particular candidate. No. Second, the more important takeaway is that it's really difficult to consider so many options at securing the elections. There was an option to have a media blackout and also regulate the use of social media. Right then and there, I said I don't imagine that being considered, as it may not be feasible as far as the Philippines is concerned. We're just so much absorbed, by media, particularly social media nowadays, and so taking it away from every individual, at least for a day, would be a serious problem, and will immediately question the credibility of the elections. However, there is an option that the authorities, COMELEC in particular, should have a way at monitoring every misinformation, particularly during the voting day, so that immediately it can be addressed publicly and inform the public that, hey, this is not true and this is misinformation. Last and definitely not the least, at the end of the day, as Comgoy has mentioned, our vote will have to be secured starting with us. And by saying starting with us, that means starting with the kind of information that we consume and that we share with everyone, hopefully. And this, again, is not just being repetitive, but being reminded always, as much as possible, that when we encounter information, let's treat it always as something to be verified before we share it, so that we don't become part of misinformation. This is not the last episode that we will do as far as elections are concerned, but definitely we will need your participation and your active following, in order that we will be able to really disseminate the right information and in the process empower everyone. With that, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat, at sa susunod na episode, hopefully we get to see you again. Thank you.